Hi, my name is Eric, and I am a pastor at the Village Church in Tucson, Arizona. And you're probably familiar with my voice if you're listening to this podcast, because I'm one of the main hosts on Healing the City, Faith Over Breakfast, and the Journey Companion Ministries podcast. And I just want to take this very quick moment to thank you for supporting our podcast, for subscribing, for giving small donations. You have made it possible for us to not have to pay for the hosting anymore. We've accomplished that goal. And I just want to thank Daniel Russin, Betsy Crawford, Brian Merrick, Tata and Nana, Corey Gilchrist, Laura Siepen, Rick Drost, and Dory Kate. You guys have all made it possible for all three podcasts to be hosted without the church having to pay the cost. Now, the next goal is really simple. We're not trying to raise a lot of money, but we do have a volunteer producer, and he's doing all of the editing, or a good portion of that editing, and he's also hosting. That would be Corey Gilchrist. And so we would love it, for those of you who haven't supported the show, to subscribe for $3 or $5 or $10 a month to help cover the cost of a couple hours a week of paying for Corey to do the editing. The editing can be very tedious, even though in our shows we try not to over-edit them and give you the raw experience of things. So if you're like, wow, I do love these three podcasts, I listen to them all the time, I'd love to help out, this is your opportunity. Look at your app and you can click support the show and do it. From there, there's some other ways that you can also support the show. So I would encourage you to do that. Thank you very much. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric, and I'm pastor of the Village Church in Tucson, Arizona, and Andy Littleton, pastor of Mission Church. It's across from me, and he's just finished up a few days ago preaching at the Village, so thank you for that.
Oh, hey, you're welcome. Strange thing is, as of now, I haven't done it, so we'll see how thankful you really are.
And we did something we've never done before, and let's talk about women's basketball, particularly the WNBA and Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese.
Yep. The cultural phenomenon that all of that is, and we come to this with all of our deep skills and our expansive knowledge.
That's right. I'm a highly rated charter basketball coach of charter school.
Yeah.
I have a record of 4, and I think somewhere around 20.
And I have an illustrious career of teaching random people, usually unsolicited, a little bit about shooting form that I learned from my middle school coach. So
that's right.
There you go.
Yeah, and basketball-wise, I rode the bench as a freshman at Rincon.
There you go.
And that's my basketball career.
And I was actually decent, but I quit playing because I wasn't really driven at the time.
Yeah.
I wanted money.
You wanted money.
So there's our careers. So having heard those and being as impressed as you are, don't you want to know what we have to say? Actually, a lot of meandering about the WNBA, trying to unpack some stuff, and then, as is often the case, save the best for last.
Oh, yeah. We
Wait
land
for
the
it.
plane. It's really good.
I think so.
All right. Enjoy, guys. Hey, Andy.
Hi.
It's so good to see you, and I'm going to see you Sunday morning.
Yeah. Oh, will you be here?
I'll be here.
Oh, so okay.
Yeah.
Just kind of like I did to you. It was
holding down the fort
while I'm preaching.
Yeah. I'll try to throw things at you. And
good. Well, I'm assuming. A little preview. Actually, who knows if this will post before or not, right?
No, it won't post till Tuesday, but yeah.
So a little post view.
Post view. How was the sermon, Andy? How'd it go?
Well, I predict bad, really bad. Well, I'd kind of given you my thought of, my big idea coming out of it. And at closer reading this week, I went, no, never mind. That's not That's not actually quite
where you're headed.
Where I'm headed. Yeah.
You're not. Are you preaching in the evening too?
I am.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
This is. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a big deal. And
that's not the easiest thing to do. Two completely different sermons, and they are.
I've done that before, and it's hard.
It's not my favorite. Yeah. I'm happy to be doing it, but it's not my favorite scenario. If I could preach the same one twice, that works actually pretty nice. It's still a long day. But
let me tell you, I do it.
You do it all the time now. Yeah, I do not. But this would be my post view. I think I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of extra stuff to say about Titus, honestly, Eric. As I will have gone through it, I think I kind of just go through the book and
perfect.
Let it do what it does with some added commentary and explanation.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, heck, might as well do questions at the end.
Because villagers they love it.
Villagers do questions. So
we'll see how the questions
that's
go.
Pretty much it, man. That's pretty much it. But it is interesting.
Yeah.
There's a particular element that stood out as I went through that I think is interesting.
I think the beauty of Titus, in contrast to 1st and 2nd Timothy, is Titus is very concise, and it's meaty, but not meaty like 1 Timothy, like where every line you're just like having to like belabor what's going on and why is he saying this, and he's shifting, like it's such a manual. It's a comprehensive manual on how to be a pastor in a difficult space.
Well, I'll tell you what stood out with Titus, since this will release afterward anyway. Yeah. As I was really digging in, is how not doctrinally meaty it was in the way that we would expect.
Sure. Yeah.
That's something that the beliefs are mentioned briefly in 2 little sections.
Yeah.
And then his biggest concern is how your behaviors are shaped by those beliefs. That's the bigger thing he wants Titus to make sure the elders pass down to the people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. Me too. Well,
you should be excited.
We'll know if you were or not when this comes out.
Yeah.
So when you think of the 3-point field goal.
Oh, love it.
From the logo. That used to be pretty much restricted for
end of game.
Steph Curry.
And Steph Curry.
But today, on my algorithms, on my feed, it's all Caitlin Clark, except Eric.
Uh-oh.
It was a very different thing last year when she was playing for Iowa. It's very different now that she's on the Fever. The way it gets the drama.
Yeah.
The new drama of the WNBA, which is working. Their sales are going up. There's new advertising campaigns. I have never seen so much WNBA in my life. Frankly, I've never been interested in it. Not that's probably shame on me. I just haven't been.
I'm going to be blunt. It's terrible basketball.
It's not the best basketball.
But when Caitlin Clark plays and you watch it, her teammates all of a sudden don't look like terrible basketball players.
Something's changing. They call it the Caitlin Clark effect. But what about Angel Reese?
She's not that great.
Oh man,
have you ever seen her rebound? Like 17 of her rebounds in one time is just her catching the ball and throwing it up against the backboard because she can't get it in the basket.
Yeah,
I do not think she's the same caliber player. She is a good WNBA player, but she's not. She does not change her teammates, nor can she take over the game like Caitlin Clark can.
Sure. So there's the basketball playing and the skill level. I'm interested in that. Yes, I've seen some Reese rebound. Actually, I noticed like a rebound and put back highlight reel, and I thought it's like it's like my level. It's if you were taking video of me playing on, and that's fine.
I mean, here's the thing: is I don't think Caitlin Clark could take me in my prime, not Caitlin Clark, Reese, under the basket.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
Stronger than her.
Yeah.
But I do not think I could guard Caitlin Clark on the perimeter.
Yeah.
I think she could get space enough to get a shot off and score and get around me.
Unlike you, I think in my prime they both could have beat me. I'll just say that. But
yeah, I don't think so.
But you're better.
I don't think she could have.
I don't think. Well, my problem was, I was the. I'm more of the perimeter shooter anyway. So, if
yeah, you have a good shot.
Thank you. So, they're playing.
Yeah.
But there's the effect. There's the cultural conversation. There's Brittany Griner. There's the a lot of other stars. There's the feelings of longtime WNBA stars are like, what about us? And many of them are very talented. And but this segment of the sport has just now become popular, really around especially Caitlin Clark. But then I would say the Magic and Bird style rivalry or perceived rivalry between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. Yeah. And to me, though, it's exhibiting in a confusing and surprising way some of what our culture is trying to figure out.
Yeah. So first, because there's some real issues, but I'd be curious.
Yeah.
What is it about Caitlin Clark that has made her such a phenomenon? Like, why do you think that is?
Why do
and before we start all that, let's just say we're talking about the WNBA today, so live with it. This is a whole different thing.
Two pastors post breakfast talking about the WNBA.
Here we go. Okay, so why? What is it about her?
Well, I'm going to preface by quickly saying there are a lot of reasons people are suggesting.
Yeah, but what is Andy
but for me, and this is probably the simple answer for many people, I heard about this women's basketball player in Iowa that could hit long threes consistently.
Right.
And it's true. She can, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
I feel a similar feeling as when I see Curry shoot him from out there, where you go like, when he gets that ball, there's a good chance this crazy three's going in, and that's fun, and that's what got Caitlin Clark on my radar. Yeah.
So,
how about you?
Here's a dirty little secret.
Oh no!
I've been watching women's college basketball for a while.
Yeah.
And Paige Becker.
Yeah.
So I followed Paige long before I followed Caitlin, and then Paige got injured, and at that time, everyone was saying Paige is going to be the thing that blows up. And she honestly is like a smooth looking player. I didn't see until the recent Final Four. She's good. As far as just like almost like aesthetic basketball, I thought she was more fun to watch than Clark. Yeah, in certain things.
Yeah,
I think. So I'm looking forward. She'll be coming next year.
Yeah.
And she's going to revolutionize whatever team that she's on.
Right.
Because my simple argument is that what was very obvious in college basketball watching Caitlin Clark and actually watching Becker before she got injured was that these players were players that could go play in level 2 men's basketball and be decent players.
Sure.
The caliber of player that they are is different than the caliber of player.
Now, okay, so I'm not the expert in women's basketball, but I'm flashing way back here to the early days of the WNBA and the like Rebecca Lobo and so on. Cool. And there was some really good players. Like I wasn't as dialed in, but I feel like that same thing could have been true, but it was a different type of player.
Yes, well, I would say that they are more finesse.
Yeah,
and the game shifted.
Those players were like, these were usually the tall, strong women.
Yes, not as good ball handlers.
But like that was the type of game, and where you're like, okay, like they're going up against each other. They're getting the ball in the hoop. But then you're seeing these like larger, taller players but it's missing the like the dunking and stuff you got with men's basketball. But this is a whole different.
So I would
game.
argue that like Caitlin Clark. People are talking, Magic and Bird. I would actually say Caitlin Clark is the equivalent to Michael Jordan, not in like she's like him.
Sure.
but that they are going to change the rules
Yeah, how the game gets played.
because of her,
Sure.
both to stop her and also to enhance her.
Right.
And because they're just not going to be able to contain her once. It's becoming more and more obvious as she's figuring out the game that she's just not going to be able to be stopped.
Yeah,
19 assists, 20 plus points. Like, it was just watching her play, and I've watched almost every game now. It's like, every game she gets better and better and better.
She's adjusting to the WNBA. The narrative, so I've not watched all the games. I've watched highlights and like one game. But and I really don't know squat about the history of the WNBA. I'm a terrible voice on the subject, but it does seem so when you have a player that has a lethal shot, like comparing in the NBA to a Curry or a Devin Booker or something like that, like they're going to get double teamed, they're going to get all this attention. So then once they shift their game and realize like now they take that double team, get the ball to their teammate underneath, and then that becomes a problem, and then they get freed up more. And then I'm wondering if the WNBA is adjusting to the level of aggression toward Clark that maybe that has always existed, but I'm not aware of it. Like, it seems like
they're
the hard
her.
fouls and stuff, and that's probably kind of new in their system because it's like, oh, okay. And part of that is the narrative. Sure. But part of that is like you just get tired of her of the scoring or whatever, right?
Well, and I think the thing is she's faster than most of the players. Once her team figured out how to catch the ball, because I hate to say it this way, but she passes the ball like a man and not like a woman. And it's very obvious when you watch how men pass and women pass in basketball, just because of their strength and the way that they seem to train is very different.
I was going to say, I assume there was something to the teaching. Yeah, there's almost like more like chest pass from the wrists, like less than kind of like cocking and your arm back or whatever. Yeah.
And she's got crazy behind the back precision. Some of her behind the back passes, you're like, what? How did that go through those two people?
Well, she just has that. Some people have, and I don't know. When I play basketball with Mike, who our worship guy at church, he has a precision to him that flows through different parts of his life, but Mike makes shots nobody has business making. And he's not good enough to go anywhere, and he wouldn't have been a great basketball player technically, but he just has, there's a knack. Yeah. There's some people just have that. Yeah. Everything's working together. Yeah.
Yeah. I think she's benefited from modern training. And it's kind of like, I think she's also the right player at the right time. Like she is Steve Nash, only at the right time.
Sure.
Like Steve Nash created an era and said, like, if he were playing now, Steve Nash would probably be the greatest player ever to play basketball. Right. Because the league is built around him. He was the one who started that.
And now the whole NBA's like going toward the Holmgrens and the Wembanyamas, and that's a whole nother
it's shifting,
which is probably more started by Durant but the game changes based on a new type of player who engages the system in a different way. And then interesting, like to the point of and to say for Angel Reese, like what she brings to the table is like almost like Rodman energy.
Oh yeah, she's very much a Rodman player.
And so she's a big persona. The media is interested in her. She's aggressive. She's just and so her Rodman was like, you never watch. I loved to watch Dennis Rodman play, but it wasn't because it was good aesthetic basketball. It was like he's just running, diving, grabbing, chucking, making the game completely different. And that is a valid,
totally agree,
and important role as well.
Yeah. Right. And
like Draymond, similar.
Yeah.
He's
a little more aesthetically beautiful in his passing.
Yeah, the passing. But the one of two NBA games I've ever been to, we went early for a Warriors game in Phoenix, and Draymond was out there practicing his threes. And I said to Michaela, my wife, I said, I could go out there and destroy him in a game of Around the World. Like, that's a weird thought, but I'm not even kidding.
Right.
Like, I think I could right now. And that's just not. But he changes the entire game in other ways.
Right,
so, yeah.
right. So that's just the technical part. Let's talk about the social, cultural part.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot going on in the WNBA. So maybe you could.
Well, shoot. I mean, it's okay. So all of a sudden, and I get the tension here. So all of a sudden, teams who've played in small venues with very small crowds are having to rent the bigger facility when the Fever come to town. Mm-hmm. Only when the Fever come to town, or especially when they come to town. And maybe that's happening a little more with the Chicago Sky. Actually, I could see.
Yeah,
I think
I don't know. I haven't heard.
I'm gonna guess that the across the board WNBA games are getting more popular.
Yes,
because of
the Caitlin Clark effect. But it's still like Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan came to play, it was packed
house, and
every place he went.
And they're not only packed; they have to get another venue to handle it.
Yeah,
and so that's very frustrating when you've been in the NBA or the WNBA for years and trying and playing and fighting for your gender to have a place, for all this stuff, for your
love of the game,
and all of a sudden everybody shows up because of this one girl. So that is going to bring out feelings and jealousies and some legitimate questioning about why now, why is this happening, and some of it's just raw. So I see all that happening. I mean, some of the narratives are going, well, because the WNBA, and now this is how I've heard it, this is not my read, the WNBA was a lot of lesbian players and players of color, but there really there's a number of Anglo women in there, of course.
Very right.
But that was I've heard it cast like that was maybe the strongest culture in there, and because that didn't fit in with American culture, it wasn't popular. And then here comes Caitlin Clark, straight, white,
pretty.
Like, yeah,
I mean, I've heard
that's the narrative.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah,
straight, white, pretty.
Right, sure. And then you've got Brittany Griner, who apparently, I don't know, I'm not checking all these things, but who is like, she looks like a man and all this stuff, where it's like now, like whether or not she's pretty is becoming, and I've seen conversations of men debating if she's pretty.
Yeah, which is just terrible.
Which is
this is
terrible and weird, and
because we aren't debating does Curry look like a woman?
Sure, right, like or a player plays with finesse.
He's girly.
Yeah, like that's feminine. I mean, you could say that of like you watch Devin Booker shoot a mid range. It's like dainty.
Yes.
Are we saying
that? We say he's like elegant and smooth.
Right. So we don't begin to have that conversation.
This is ridiculous because we're still objectifying women.
Yeah.
This is
100%.
Yeah.
And then like which version of pretty is it? The African American version of, and then you've got Angel Reese who's like
also very pretty.
And she's like, no, like I'm pretty too, and I'm talented, and I'm part of why people want to do this. And I think she, and that's fair. But so you see the lesbian versus or LGBTQ plus conversation, but especially like lesbian versus straight in this case, right? Like that's a big conversation. That's like, is culture embracing Clark because she's straight? Then there's the race conversation. Like, is Clark definitely the best player in the WNBA? I don't know. I would say she's not right now.
Clark?
But yeah, that's
I'd say she's in the top 5.
I'm not the most. The little bits of games I've watched, I've gone, I don't know if she's the best. But is it because she's white, right? Is that why she's getting the popularity when there were, African American players who've been playing at high levels who nobody took this kind of notice of? So that's another conversation. Then, I mean, those are the two big ones I hear, frankly.
Well, I think they're partially right in that it didn't present a cultural, something that fit into mainline culture. The other thing is that I don't know how to undo this, or if it's something we even undo, but because it's women playing basketball, we expect a certain aesthetic, and we actually expect it to be a little bit more beautiful in its play.
Yeah,
and we also expect them to be more beautiful in the sense of like, I don't even know how to say this. Like, I'm not saying that they're not beautiful, but like when it comes to the cultural, this is what is pretty. We expect that because when we as a culture go to observe and consume women, and we don't go to observe and consume men. So I would argue that what's happening to Caitlin Clark is she's being consumed, and she's a consumable like woman, like in the ways that fit our cultural narrative.
It's interesting because I'm sure that's true.
Whatever.
I'm quite no. I'm quite sure that's true. But I actually would have come at it from another angle, like.
Well, because you're smarter than me.
No, it's not. Actually, I think you're speaking a very true thing. I think of it more like consuming basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thought on it would have been my hang up with like the WNBA would have not been. It's more like I like watching a form of basketball. I like dunking. I like I like the long threes. I like the honestly like combination of like aggressiveness and high skill level. And so because I've become accustomed to that in the days of Michael Jordan and so on, it's hard to like go. It's really hard to get. So I came of age in the Michael Jordan years where he's taking off from nearly the free throw line and doing these incredible in air acrobatics and then laying the ball in with the smoothest touch, right? And barking at people in between, and did he shove off when he made the game winning shot and all of that.
He did, but anyway.
Yeah. So it's difficult to get into that and then go, but I'm also really enjoying this version that is where there's not dunking and there's not the same level of like kind of it's just different.
Well,
I honestly have normally thought of it not about like the looks of the player. I never thought of watching the WNBA to watch pretty girls.
Right.
I was always thinking of watching basketball. Yeah.
Well, let me say it this way. Like, so men we consume for strength.
Sure.
So that's why I like dunking. Yeah. So here, and people are gonna be mad at me for this, but it's the truth, and no one cares about my opinion. But Steve Nash is probably one of the best basketball players ever to play basketball. I would argue that he's better than Kobe Bryant. I would argue that he's better than Shaq.
Are you about to bring up how weird looking that guy was?
He is very weird looking. But here's my thing. You would not enjoy watching men's basketball if it were 5 Steve Nashes.
Sure.
Playing on because you have to have a strength finish. The man can shoot elegantly, but he mostly assisted. And people dunked off of his assists or did fantastic things.
Chris Paul-like in our day.
A display of strength is what we look at basketball, for men's basketball for. I would say we look at a display of elegance and beauty for women's basketball. I would argue it would be much more popular. But it's kind of a brute game underneath the basket. But
it's the Warriors motif would challenge that a bit,
but they still dunk.
Sure. Yes.
So the other thing is that when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson hit the league, prior to that, basketball was terrible. Now you might say, "Oh, well, what about Dr. J and what about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?" They were exceptions to the rule. If you go watch the games, the basketball was bad.
I'm gonna chip in here and say, yes, I have seen that old footage, and that's what I'm describing with the WNBA is not merely about the gender of the player. I feel the same way about that old footage. It's like, this doesn't appeal to me. But that's because I was conditioned on something. I grew up on Michael Jordan.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I still think that the money wasn't there.
Yeah.
The training wasn't there. Right. So when
the technology to display it wasn't there.
Yeah. So Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, and I would say argued, bolstered by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Dr. J and a few other
Chamberlain
and Wilt Chamberlain, some other characters underneath all of that. They in the 80s brought them, and there was a lot of money in the 80s, brought the league into a science, like a what do you call it, an athletic science, like where we end up having more trainers and people are doing more research and more money's been pouring into diet and all that. So by the time you get to the 90s, mid 90s, you are now have a different kind of athlete playing basketball.
Quick question here: is this especially true of basketball?
I would say yes. I think there would. I would argue that NFL football players through the ages, at least from the 60s on up or 70s on up, can compete. Maybe not at the same. You may not have as many of the same athletes, but those are nasty men.
Well, the I'm leaning toward thinking this is not entirely, but more acutely true of basketball for some reason.
Yes,
and I think
agree.
Because of the nature of, so let's take the two sports on their polar edges. So on the other side is football, high contact, like you're wearing pads and helmets. You hardly see the person.
Right.
The whole idea is bashing into each other as hard as possible, dislodging the ball. If you hurt somebody, that's fine.
Right.
Like that. So that's the other extreme. Of course, there's extreme athleticism, but the like feel of football when you watch old footage, it's still there.
Yeah.
Right.
Nasty.
Almost in a cool, like old raw way.
Yeah.
Like,
and sometimes you're like, wow, that was a scary hit.
Yeah. And when they had just the little like padded helmet things, and you're like, how did they not all die? And then on the other side is baseball, which is like there's rarely contact between players, and so they're spaced throughout. Baseball is just such a completely different game. There's no time clock. It's the only major sport where the defense controls the ball. There's all of this and the fine precision and the rarity of a big hit. And so you have these players stand out for brief moments. Like right. I watched a game the other day on TV. I normally listen on the radio because I'm a baseball fan. And there was only one spectacular athletic play.
Right.
And I've had to explain this to people who watch baseball, and I go, the amazing thing is in that split second, when all of a sudden they're called upon, you see that athleticism that they have to have at all times.
Yeah.
In basketball, you watch it the whole match.
Right.
It's every player on that court is being extremely athletic. Their bodies are very visible.
Yeah.
Their whole person is very visible. So the aesthetic sense of what it means to watch basketball is heightened, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I think to go back to the sense of consumerism, I mean, I think I think that's what women's basketball has going against it, is that we're a culture that consumes women, and we expect the women that are presented to be consumed have to be a particular aesthetic, and most of the women don't fit that lifestyle or aesthetic, and therefore it's not something we want to watch. It's also then not really good basketball, because you can take a championship high school team and they can beat most of the NBA basketball team or WNBA basketball teams pretty handily, because they're just muscularly. It's happened multiple times.
I have no idea.
Yeah, so it's like they're not, because they can't dunk, and they're not physically able to handle male musculature by the time the guys are in their 20s or in their late teens. So it's I mean, that's why
you can imagine like 19-year-old LeBron James like would just tear up.
Yeah, well, this is why. So
I mean, he tore up.
We used to have a guy who played. He went to the Village. He now lives in California, but he went to Stanford.
Okay.
When Stanford was their women's basketball team was the team, he scrimmaged against them. He was a high school. I think he might have been an All-American. There's a picture of him dunking in his newspaper he showed me. But anyway, it didn't matter. He said we would routinely just crush them by 50 points. We were the team that would scrimmage them. Like, they don't scrimmage against women's teams. They scrimmage against college women's teams, scrimmage against men's team, men.
Because they need stiff competition.
Yes. So, and he said they just could not. We just knocked them around. They could not stop us.
Interesting. I mean, yeah. Again, I have no idea, but I could see the potential for that. So here's, I think, culturally, and we're pastors, right? Like, we clearly care about basketball to some degree. But
I'm sure that everybody's tuned out by now.
Yeah, you and I have played before. We could talk a little bit about our respective games. It's been a bit, but the cultural stuff that this brings up, I think it's creating a conversation, and this is. So here you have a woman. It's kind of how we talked about. It's like the Taylor Swift of women's basketball.
Yeah, she is.
Like, here's she is packing arenas, right? And so that's a huge win in a way for women's sports. I'll frame it this way. My little cousins and their grandma love Caitlin Clark, right? And we're so excited.
Do they love Taylor Swift too?
I don't know. Probably not.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I don't think so, actually. But maybe. But they love Caitlin Clark. And then, so she gets to the WNBA, and you think about these arenas full of girls who are on social media to see Caitlin Clark, but now they're watching all these other WNBA players that can't stand her, that are saying, mean things about her, saying that she stinks and that it's just because she's white. So the question is, is it, what's most important, that the growth of the women's sport or the racial conversation?
Yeah.
Which, this gets into kind of your hierarchy of oppressions. Like, which one was most prominent? Was it your choice of your sexual lifestyle? Like, which one? And these girls are now watching that. Just because a girl makes it doesn't mean that's the problems are solved. There's new ones, and there's new distinctions, and everything is getting cut apart. And it's like, well, yeah, she's not special because she's straight and white. And if you like that, you're not a good person. And then over here, it's like, but Angel Reese and her fans, it's like she's trying to make the argument like, I'm the one and they're looking at her too and going, so why does everybody come and see Caitlin Clark, and what does it take to really be important and get attention and have the society love you? And that seems to me like this issue that all these honestly young girls, like middle school girls, are being thrust into, especially, and we're watching it, but those girls are having to wrestle with that right now. Like, what does it mean to make progress, to be, and they're watching how messy it all is and having to unpack all that. So
well, and I think that it's weird because I think it would be silly for us to not say that the African American community doesn't face oppression. And there are all of these subtle built-in things into the system. But what is also distressing is that this is their system, in a sense, right?
Yeah,
it's where they have power.
Right. I think that's a big piece of it.
And then someone who is part of the power culture is now entering into their community, in their mind, and getting all their attention.
Well, sure.
The thing is, it's pretty obvious that even the more that Reese criticizes Caitlin, the less popular she becomes. She can walk freely. She walks freely through a packed arena and no one's asking her for autographs, not even interrupting or bothering her, really.
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark can't walk anywhere without being mobbed by people.
Right.
And I'm wondering, so that's why the question I asked, so why not Angel Reese? Why is this a different phenomena? Why? Because Caitlin Clark's not making an argument for herself in contrast to someone else. But it's the same thing that, when you see a woman come into power like this, like young girls are like caught up in this, and caught up in.
Well, and just to add a couple of, I don't know if these are right. I'm just going to say like a couple of things you could say is Angel Reese's persona was built on her social media commentary as opposed to her, like Caitlin Clark's is built on her 3-point shooting, frankly, and her just ball handling. But that's a difference in how so Angel Reese has a huge following, but it's more her social media persona. So you might expect her to get her biggest following there. Maybe her TikTok has more followers than Caitlin Clark's. I don't know.
Right, because Caitlin's not spending any time and she may hire somebody to do
right. But then another argument that could be made would be somebody would say, well, so Caitlin Clark's fans are more socially mobile and able to go all over the country and spend outrageous amount. I mean, the ticket, I looked at going to the Fever game in Phoenix because I was kind of interested, and I was like, oh my goodness, it was more expensive than the Warriors game.
Right. You needed to have gotten season tickets to women's basketball about 5 years ago. If you wanted to be ready for this phenomenon.
Or to take your family, it's going to be $2,000.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And so maybe Angel Reese's fans can't do it. Like maybe they're less likely to be able to shell that out. That'd be an argument I could imagine. But I still think that ultimately, as a basketball player, Caitlin Clark is the more popular figure, and maybe Reese is. I think it's more that her fame comes from her commentary on herself and life and other basketball players and all that.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
But okay, so let me put it this way, since we're pastors. So 6 to 8 year old girl wearing her Caitlin Clark jersey comes up to you at church and says, "Why are the other women so mean to Caitlin?" How do you help? What do you say? How do you unpack this for this?
Very, very unlikely to have someone ask me this question, but
I personally think there's a bunch of girls who are trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I do online. Yeah, I think I am, as a 50-year-old man, kind of out of the social media world. And since I mean, literally, if I look at Facebook, I then delete it off my phone and then put it, because I'm trying really hard not to be connected to these things.
Well, but imagine.
Yeah, no, I
the little girl who loves basketball as much as you did when you were a little boy.
Well, if it's the same reason I always was like, well, why do people hate Larry Bird so much?
Did you thought about that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I did not think about that.
Yeah. Well, because I grew up with Larry Bird.
Yeah.
Nobody liked Larry Bird. It's the same thing, if Larry Bird hadn't been so, in some ways, you'll hear the other basketball players say this, if he hadn't been black, like he hadn't been one of them, like they wouldn't have respected him. Like he was too good, and he also just like got in their face and told them they weren't any good. Like he kind of got into the culture. Where I don't see that with Caitlin Clark. She always, she won't say things about Angel Reese. She won't say things about, like, even when you got 19 assists and 20 points and you set the record. This has never happened before, ever. She says, well, but we didn't win the game.
Right.
Like so she's not playing the game. So I don't know what I would tell us. I would say, like, well, I think in our world, life, when you're given a lot, people have a hard time with that. And sometimes people feel like you're taking their stuff because of it. And there's some jealousy there, and so the frustration that they're not being recognized for the things that they've done. I mean, I think there's a lot going on there, but I think it's also, we're in a culture war, and that culture war, I wouldn't tell a 6-year-old this, but it's a war between what do we want to say is important. I mean, that's all this is. It's like Caitlin Clark came in, and we all are saying, hey, Caitlin Clark's important. and you're not. And I'm not saying that from a Christian perspective. We're just saying that as a culture. Yeah. And the people are like, well, you're not important. Well, why am I not important? What is it that Caitlin Clark has that I don't? I mean, that's what Angel Reese is asking.
Sure.
Right. And I think what people are struggling to say is, well, you just don't have the intangibles, which is the thing we used to talk about as coaches all the time. It's the intangibles. She has all the intangibles, the things that you can't describe, the things that you know you need on the court, but you don't practice.
It's kind of interesting. Now, she might practice. I don't know.
I don't know what these intangibles are to practice, right?
But it would be a little different if, I mean, it is. So you got like Sabrina Ionescu, another Anglo girl who didn't get this kind of attention. Who's an incredible shooter.
She's a beautiful shooter. Beautiful to watch.
You've got, is it Asia? What? She's a great player. Mm-hmm. It would maybe be different if the primary discussion was between her and Caitlin Clark. That would be a little more apples to apples than Reese and Caitlin Clark. That's an interesting thing here. Is their game is so different and their rise to fame is so different. But they both had a rise to fame. So,
right. I think, but and I'll tell you the one intangible that I think that it's infectious is that she has a kind of charisma that makes her better or makes everyone around her better. And when I watched her play at Iowa, Caitlin Clark, her team was bad. I mean, they're okay players, but in comparison to the other college teams they were playing, they should not have been where they were. And they would not have been there without Caitlin. But they all looked really good when she was on the floor. And when she was off the floor, a lot of times they struggled.
Yeah.
I've watched the Fever from the very beginning. And I'm looking at these players and saying, you guys have gotten, like you as players have gotten 10 times better.
Well, and there's probably, when you talk about the Caitlin Clark effect, there is the person Caitlin Clark on the floor, but there's also something about packed out arenas.
Yeah.
And those things factor into how you compete and and how you practice and what the expectations upon you when you play in front of that kind of crowd change. Right. It just does. It brings something out of you. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the thing about like, everybody wanted to play with Steve Nash because you're going to get more points. You're going to get more opportunities to shoot. Like eventually you want to be around the person who's making you better. You want to play harder. You want to be in your right position because you're going to get the ball in the right spot and you're going to be able to score. And that's going to make your paycheck better. That's going to make your popularity better. Like you want to be around greatness, I think.
So if somebody
tangible though, you want to be around greatness.
Yeah. If somebody in, let's just say the elders of the village gathered and said, Eric, we have decided we want a sermon on Caitlin Clark.
I'd say this is not in the Bible, guys.
But they say you got to figure it out. Like you have to do this. What would be? You know
that your elders would never do that.
Well, neither would yours. But we're imagining.
Okay.
So if they did that, and you had to go like, what thing from the Bible ties in with this story? Like, what does this have to do with our faith? Where would you go with that? This particular journey.
Well, I think the phenomenon is the David phenomenon. King David. Like I would follow. I mean, because everything. I mean, yes, everyone was against him, and yet he's the anointed king, and he does fantastic things like kill Goliath, and get rescued, and rescue people in fantastic ways, and eventually is crowned king. I mean, there's something, but I mean, I don't like if you're looking for me to. But then again, the difference between Caitlin Clark and David is I don't hear Caitlin Clark acknowledging Jesus. She's not a follower of Jesus.
I've never once heard
She's humble, and she's an Iowa girl. I mean, it's very obvious that way. But like, as humble as like someone as good as she can be.
Or she's at least choosing not to talk proud.
She chooses
I don't know how she talks on the floor. I have no idea.
Yeah.
To the media, she's figured out she's the persona she's going to be is the sweet Iowa girl.
Yes.
Who just defers glory to others. And
So David honored God for him. At least he acknowledged God in all of these spaces, even though he was doing great things empowered by God. So I might go there. I just don't know how I could preach maybe I would talk. I mean, I could preach about how the idols of our culture, and Caitlin Clark is an idol.
Yeah.
Right. We've just spent, 46 minutes talking about Caitlin Clark.
Right.
And people are worshiping Caitlin Clark. They're giving her glory.
Sure.
They're pointing to her. They're offering her praise. They're lifting her up. They're going to her temples and cheering for her and for her fellow priests who she So I might talk about our misplaced praise and worship and the distraction of an icon that could move us away from Jesus. Because this is an icon that doesn't actually point that glory towards God. She takes the glory or points the glory to her other players. So I don't know. Maybe that'd go that way. How about you? That's the best I can get at. Those two sermons would be the ones I might look at.
Yeah, I mean, I think just since I can't take those.
Oh, you could.
Well, I mean, I would want to come at it from kind of the maybe I would be wanting to talk to the Angel Reese and Brittany Griner fans and say, what is most important in this life? Because if it's getting the loudest praise and the most recognition, then this is devastating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this whole endeavor of the WNBA for you has been a total failure. And that would be really, really hard if that's the purpose of this life. But if the purpose of this life is to know your Creator and to be seen by your Creator for who you are, what you offer, and it's not based on how well you stack up to Caitlin Clark or anybody else, then you could continue without getting all the glory. Maybe something of that, like to say, like maybe the angst and the anger here is because like this thing you're hoping in is not being given to you, and that's a window. It's either a window into just how darn unfair the whole world is and how much it sucks, or it's a window into the fact that there's actually something deeper out there that you must find. Keep looking, something to that.
So I have a question.
The kingdom
for you.
that's buried. Yeah,
that's really good. By the way, good job. Would never have thought about that. Question though, different. Yeah, different. So, John Simon.
Yeah,
he gets a call, and it's from a multi-campus. Oh, it's actually the Village in Texas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Village.
The Village in Texas. Right, multi-campus, big mega church, really solid space. They call him up and they're like, "Hey, like we've been watching you and Andy, and we love the way you planted Mission Church.
Yeah,
love how you did it. In fact, we are so impressed with that we'd like to give you, like Matt Chandler's going to retire, and we think you'd be the best for that. Good job in mission."
Yeah.
How would you feel?
Oh, yeah, that's the similar type of dilemma, right? Yeah. Like, where you're like, well, I'm supposed to be happy.
Yeah.
But they are misreading the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Man, I think that's a key in this whole thing.
I absolutely agree with you. Like that's I think it's the key where people are going, we've built this over years and years and years. Like Caitlin Clark doesn't come to the WNBA if there's no WNBA because we fought for years and years and years and rode on the subpar airplanes and all this stuff. And now you walk into this thing with your private jet, right? And like, that's hard to stomach. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if life is supposed to be fair, then what in the world?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's at the core of a lot of what's going on there.
Absolutely. Of course.
And I mean, I know if Mark came back, I mean, and was like, hey, like, I don't think I'm going to continue as pastor at the Village. I've got a $1 million book deal in a big church that's asking me to come, basically take over their worship ministry.
And the reason is because they've seen everything I did at the Village.
Yeah, and they're like, wow, like you just have really done a great job with the music and discipleship there. So we're going to.
And here comes the big phrase that you and I probably hear as pastors over and over again. What about me?
Yeah. Yeah.
What about me?
Yeah, and that's what I feel. It's like, well, I don't get to be recognized.
Yeah.
I don't get to be. I mean, and I that's so to be in there, to put myself in their shoes, which is something that I think your sermon would invite us even to. It's like, well, that's wow. That kind of just exposes not just their space of sin, but mine. Like, that I have that just at the surface of what about me?
Yeah.
Well, what are you? I need to be recognized. Seen, known, cared about. Come on.
Yeah. And that's I mean, I think in a way, Angel Reese is like almost verbatim said that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's understandable. And if life, here's an individualism moment or something, but like if life is really about each one of us ascending to our most magnificent selves, then that is the core question.
Yeah.
And if you can't get the answer that, like, if the answer isn't you're the best or you're one of the best or you're, then it's devastating. But if life is about something else, not that you wouldn't feel that, not that we are who we are. We do care about ourselves. We can't help it. That's normal. That's natural. God made us to be aware of ourselves, right?
Right.
But if there's a God you ultimately play for, you can keep playing.
Yeah.
And do what you really believe in, no matter what recognition you end up with, right?
Yeah.
Which is probably what I would hope I would end up concluding when John went off to get his multi-million-dollar book deal and everything. It
turns out that Mark and him are going to take over the Village in Texas. That's
the hey.
That was the.
You know what? From what I hear, the Village needs it.
Yeah,
in Texas. Yeah. So that's There you go.
That was good. That's WNBA.
WNBA.
You and I don't know how many episodes, 5 seasons, have never talked about the WNBA.
You know what? Why are we talking about it now?
Because
the daggone Caitlin Clark effect.
She filtered down to our podcast.
How?
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Yep. Rate us. Ask us a question. Hit that text to question us thing in the app. faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com if you're an emailing type.
Yeah.
And you can always write multi-$1,000 checks to the Village to cover all of our costs if you're so inclined. But thank you to those who've given lesser but meaningful amounts to help us fund this thing.
Yeah, and just subscribe. All right. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.